Dodgers history, and he was black during the time he played with them from 1947 to 1957.
When did the Dodgers move?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it was in the 60s, but I'll look. Now, the thing about becoming the highest paid athlete in Dodgers history, what did he do? He opened the door for other African American players, such as Willie Mays and Hank Aaron. You ever heard of those guys? Okay, you're a little younger, but you probably should have heard of them. Willie Mays was a great player for the San Francisco Giants, and Hank Aaron was a great player for the Milwaukee, then the Atlanta Braves. And actually, it was Hank Aaron who broke Babe Ruth's Major League home run record at 714. And boy, did he take crap for that because he was black. He got 8 letters forever for breaking a white man's record, but we'll talk about that later. After a great baseball career, Jackie Robinson became very active in business, and he became an activist for social change. Now, he had to make a living after he got done, so he worked as an executive for a company called the Chock Full of Nuts Coffee Company. Nobody's raising their eyebrows going, oh, I've heard that before. See if you have. I bet you have. Okay? So he becomes an executive for the Chock Full of Nuts Coffee Company. Okay? And this is what I'm giving you here is just a letter that he wrote on May 13th, 1958 to the President of the United States, complaining a little bit about how Negroes were treated. And I'll just read a little bit to you. It says, "My dear Mr. President, I was sitting at the audience at the summit meeting of Negro leaders yesterday when you said we must have patience. On hearing you say this, I felt like standing up and saying, oh no, not again. I respectfully remind you, sir, that we have been the most patient of all people. When you said we must have self-respect, I wondered how we could have self-respect and remain patient considering the treatment accorded us through the years. 17 million Negroes cannot do as you suggest and wait for the hearts of men to change. We want to enjoy now the rights that we feel we are entitled to as Americans. This we cannot do unless we pursue aggressively goals which other Americans achieved over 150 years ago. As the chief executive of our nation, I respectfully suggest that you unwittingly crush the spirit of freedom in Negroes by constantly urging forbearance and give hope to those pro-segregation leaders like Governor Faubus, who would take from us even those freedoms we now enjoy. Your own experience with Governor Faubus is proof enough that forbearance and not eventual integration is the goal for the pro-segregation leaders seek. In my view, an unequivocal statement backed up by action such as you demonstrated, you could take the last fall in dealing with Governor Faubus if it become necessary. Would let it be known that America is determined to provide in the near future for Negroes the freedoms we are entitled to under the Constitution." Can you imagine what this letter, the original, is worth? Anybody know anything about Chock Full of Nuts? I think you're going to. I'm really hoping. How many people? What? I don't know.
I recognize the bank.
Has anybody seen the movie, The Bucket List?
Yeah.
Where were these guys buried? In a can of chock full of nuts. So how many people watched that show, The Bucket List? Well, at the end, he said he wanted to be buried in a can of chock full of nuts coffee. You remember the coffee that was worth so much and he teased him and ended up being, what was it? Crap of what? Animals or something. I don't know. You remember that though. Chock full of nuts. Okay? Jackie Robinson. All right. Let's tell you a couple other things about him, then we'll move on to another month. Jackie actually served on the board of the NAACP until 1967. And he was the first African-American player to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And that happened in 1962. He served on the board of the NAACP until 1967 and was the first African-American player to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962. In 1972, 10 years after his Hall of Fame induction, the Dodgers retired his uniform number 42. Jackie Robinson eventually died from heart problems and diabetes on October 24th, 1972. He died in Connecticut, and he is survived to this day by his wife, Rachel Issam Robinson, and 2 of their 3 children. What's that?
When did he die?
I'll repeat it. In 1972, the Dodgers retired his uniform number of 42. Jackie Robinson died from heart problems and diabetes on October 24th, 1972 in Connecticut. And he's survived to this day by his wife, Rachel Robinson, and 2 of his 3 children. She's out all the time, Rachel Robinson. She was at the World Series. After his death, his wife, Rachel, established the Jackie Robinson Foundation, basically dedicated to honoring his life and his work. And what that foundation does is it helps young people by providing scholarships and mentoring programs across the United States. So you seniors might get on the website and see if you qualify for the Jackie Robinson Foundation Scholarship. You never know, you might check it out. Now, what else does Major League Baseball do yearly in honor of Jackie Robinson? Anybody know? They have a listen to this, kids, they have a baseball game in which every single player that day wears the number 42. Every Major League stadium has retired the number 42 in honor of him. That doesn't mean they don't have a 42 on their team, but it means if you look at these stadiums, every one of them will have a circle with a 42 on the stadium somewhere, usually on the home run wall. That's how popular Jackie Robinson was. Well, it was on January 5th of 1957 that he announced that he would retire from Major League Baseball, but important person to know. Okay, let's talk about February. 2 things happened in February. First of all, this is kind of interesting. On February 8th of 1957, probably the biggest track and field star for the University of Pennsylvania quit the team. His name was Bruce Dern. Okay? You think, what's that matter? It's kind of interesting. February 8th, 1957, probably the best track and field athlete on the University of Pennsylvania's track team, Bruce Dern, decides he's going to quit the team. Anybody know why he quit? What? University of Pennsylvania. Anybody want to guess why he quit? Think about the time period. He was quit. Yeah, go ahead.
They decided to interview.
That's a good guess. That's a good guess, but no. What was happening in the late 50s and 60s? Styles were changing. Who was popular in the 1950s? Hippies? Is that what you said? Kind of. What happened, not quite to the hippie route, but Elvis Presley was pretty, we're going to talk about him, he was pretty hot stuff, and he grew long sideburns. Well, Bruce Dern grew some long sideburns to kind of have the Elvis look, and his coach told him to shave them off, and he told him he wouldn't. And he said, well, if you don't shave them off, you're not going to be on this team. So he quit. So he becomes the first dress code radical, so to speak. So the University of Pennsylvania track and field star Bruce Dern quit his team because he refused to shave off his Elvis-like sideburns as requested by his coach. Now, before I get to the next thing that happened, I just kind of explain each thing, and that's kind of weird. Well, when I was in high school, way back in the old days, I remember when I went into Forsyth High School as a 7th grader, because it was a 7-12, and the first day of school, Mr. Goyette, the principal, kicked out like almost every senior boy because his hair was over his ears, and he was growing facial hair. And I remember Roger Burtle, to this day, was so mad he got on his motorcycle and he just protested by driving up and down Main Street all day long. And that was a big deal, news in Forsyth. So dress codes, and we're going to talk about dress codes more when we get into the 60s, but dress codes started coming into being. Now, one more quick story. I take over the principal job at Fort Benton High School in 1995. You got to think back. 1995. And so the reason, and when I took the job, they told me the discipline here is awful. You're going to have to come in and change it. So that's a number one priority. Kids are just walking out of class, doing whatever they want. And if you, that's what you got to do. So what I did is try to do the right thing. So I met with the student council that spring before I took the job in the fall. And I said, listen, you know we're going to have to come up with a serious discipline policy or attendance policy. This is what they're asking. I'm asking for your input. Is there some rule within reason right now that you think is stupid that I'll throw out in exchange for what I'm going to bring in? Okay, does that make sense? You know what the rule was in 1996? 1996, boys couldn't have facial hair in that school. Because the principal was like 60-some years old, he just retired, I replaced him, he was very conservative. Boys could not have facial hair. And I'm thinking, so they come up, they said, well, we'll work with you if you'll change this one rule. The boys right now can't have facial hair. I said, done. Right? So for like the first 2 weeks of school, we had the worst looking beards and mustaches you could imagine. Every boy was growing a beard and mustache. After that 2 weeks came over, I can only remember Sam Rankins, the only kid that kept his mustache. The rest kids were just as clean shaven as could be. But it was the thought they couldn't do it, right? So dress codes, and we'll talk more about dress codes in the 60s, but this is where it kind of started with Elvis Presley. Okay, something very important that happened that we'll talk about very detailed in the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s happened on February 15th, when a fellow by the name of Andrei Gromyko became Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States. On February 15th of 1957, Andrei Gromyko becomes Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States. If you're Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States, what does that mean? That means that you're going to meet with the president and stuff and discuss matters that have to do with Russia. You're going to be the Soviet Foreign Minister. Just like we would send an American Foreign Minister to Russia to deal with Stalin if he was in power. That's crucial because that guy's going to come into big play during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Andrei Gromyko. But on February 15th, he is named Soviet Foreign Minister to the United States. Okay, March 11th. An admiral by the name of Richard Byrd became the first man to fly over both the North and South Poles. He was the first man to fly over both the North and South Poles. On March 11, 1957, he passed away at the age of 68. So Richard Byrd, who was the first man to fly over both the North and South Poles during his illustrious career, died at the age of 68 on March 11, 1957. Admiral Richard Byrd, the first man to fly over both the North and South Poles, died at the age of 68. Now, this is kind of interesting. On March 22nd, for the first time in history, the American Heart Association reported that smoking could cause lung cancer. Believe it or not. It was March 22nd of 1957 when the American Heart Association first reported publicly in the United States that if you smoke, you could get lung cancer. That's when it was stated. March 22nd, 1957, the American Heart Association reports for the first time that smoking actually could cause lung cancer. I have two parents that would attest to that if they could. April 5th. The Soviet Union tests an H-bomb to basically warn the Western Hemisphere against nuclear war. So on April 5th, 1957, the Soviet Union tests another H-bomb, and basically it's a warning to the Western Hemisphere that, hey, we can compete with the big boys too, but they really did it to warn against nuclear war. I guess the way you warn against something like that is to prove that you can do it, and it could happen. So they test another H-bomb, and they warn the Western Hemisphere, which include the United States, we're with you. So let's be careful we don't end up in a nuclear war. On April 9th, if you look at that sheet I gave you, an Italian automobile known as the Fiat entered the American market. An Italian automobile by the name of the Fiat entered the American market. What does that kind of remind you of that we have today? What's that? It's kind of tiny, so what's it kind of remind you of? Well, maybe a Volkswagen, how about the Mini Cooper? Yeah, kind of like a Mini Cooper. And a Fiat, and it was okay.
I was going to say like the Fiat.
Yeah, well, but it looks like a Mini Cooper, doesn't it kind of? But it is the same company, Fiat. He makes a good point. It's the same company. That was just the first time they came into the United States. All right, one more month. May. These things happened on the same day. One was very, very sad, and one really set the career for another person. The sad thing on May 6th of 1957, you could ask Ellen Durr, although she isn't here to ask, but she would tell you that she was very sad on May 6th when the last episode of I Love Lucy was aired on CBS. The last episode of I Love Lucy. How popular was that? Kids, you can still see it today. They still have reruns of that. Yeah. So, but it ended. You know, it didn't have reruns in those days. And my mother, I can remember her telling me later, because I wasn't even born yet, but how much she liked I Love Lucy. And later in life, when she was older and they brought them back, oh man, she was on fire. But that was a sad day for Americans when I Love Lucy had its last episode on May 6th. Very significant thing that happened on May 6th that will tie into what we talk about in the future is Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature with his book entitled Profiles in Courage. Profiles in Courage. Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts on May 6, 1957 wins the Pulitzer Prize for Literature with his book entitled Profiles in Courage. Now, I don't want you to stop paying attention. You can stop taking notes and we'll see if you remember some of this. That book, anybody remember last year we talked about? What's it about? 8 Courageous Americans. One of those was Edmund G. Ross, remember? That made the vote that did not impeach Senator Johnson, Vice President Johnson replaced Lincoln. So we'll talk more about this book later, but his book was very famous and it really put him on the national spotlight, which led really a lot of people think to his presidency. So we'll go from there. We will fit, here's kind of what I see is, let's look here a second. I want to tell you kind of where we're going. I think we're going to finish these notes up probably Monday and maybe part 2. We're going to have a test next Wednesday, I'll just tell you that. We will have an exam next Wednesday on this, and then I'm going to show you some, a couple videos and we'll go from there, yeah?
When that essay is to win is in December.
Whatever that Monday is, the finals week, the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, December 19th. Hey, another thing is, kids, we got to get going. I don't get going, but we don't have much time for those raffle tickets are due. So if you're planning on selling more, we got to get those going and get them in. And then we'll have this potluck you're talking about on Wednesday. That'll be kind of fun.
That sounds awesome.
Well, we'll be Thursday because that's next year.
I'm
I'm not going to say it's
We have early release Wednesday then?
We do. But oh, we do, so that'll be weird.
Hey.
Pause that.
How?
Taking a 12-hour drive. Brooke can't figure out how to
Oh
pause
my
it.
gosh.